So as of today, the seeding games are set to complete, and we'll know for sure who's going to be in the playoffs, and who will be in the play-in tournament for the 8th seed. We're looking at the LA Clippers playing against the Dallas Mavericks, the Denver Nuggets facing the Utah Jazz, and arguably the best one, the Houston Rockets facing the OKC Thunder. Each of these matchups have a lot to look forward to. I mean, you have the high-scoring Mavericks offense versus the Clippers' perimeter defense. You have the matchup of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert versus Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, and just the tall ball Nuggets in general. And then, of course, you have the matchup of OKC versus Houston, which has multiple things going for it. First, you have the matchup of James Harden versus Chris Paul, and then you have Russell Westbrook versus OKC. So this is what we're going to be talking about in this video. We're going to be discussing all the matchups in the West, and just to be clear, we're not going to be talking about the 1 seed versus 8 seed matchup just yet, because we won't even know who's going to be in the 8th seed until a couple days from now. But before we begin, if you're new here, I'm Double D. I'm a huge basketball fan and I make NBA videos here on YouTube. So if you're also an NBA fan, or just a basketball fan in general, feel free to hit the sub button, and click the bell to be notified when I upload more videos just like this one. Alright, let's get into the video. Now, there's a good amount to cover in this video, so let's just start right away with these matchups. The first one to look at is the Clippers versus the Mavericks. Now, they played 3 times during the season and the Clippers won all 3 games. The main thing to take away from this is the fact that Kristaps Porzingis never really shot that well in these games. In the first game in November, he shot 4 for 13 and 3 for 8 from 3. In the second game in January, he shot 4 for 17 and 1 for 8 from 3. And in the recent game on August 6th, he shot 9 for 19 and 3 for 7 from 3, which isn't actually that bad. But those other 2 performances are worth looking at, since Luka didn't shoot that well in those 2 games before the restart either. In the November game, he shot 4 for 14 overall and 0 for 8 from 3. In the January game, he shot 12 for 26 overall and 3 for 12 from 3. And it makes sense because the Mavericks don't match up that well against them. They have nobody to guard both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. You have to worry about Lou Williams coming off the bench with Montrezl Harrell, and I've been saying that the Clippers probably have one of the best benches in the league with those 2. The Mavericks had the highest offensive rating in the history of the NBA this season, but still fell to this Clippers team all 3 times they played them by an average of 11 points. And that was mainly due to the Clippers being able to hold them to 105 points per game in their matchups, even though Dallas averages over 117 points a game. The thing that's led to this is just the fact that the Clippers are a much better closing team than Dallas at this point in time, and just a better equipped team overall. The first time they played, Dallas only held a 3-0 lead for the first minute of the game, and then the Clippers led the rest of the game, going up by 20 at one point. The second game was much closer, but showed what I was talking about earlier. The game was tied at 96 with 4 minutes left before the Clippers went on a run and pushed their lead to 8 in less than 2 minutes, and held on to win the game. So the Mavericks just aren't quite there yet. I think they may get a game off of the Clippers, but it should be a pretty easy win for LA. So next, let's go over the Nuggets and the Jazz. Now, this series is probably going to be the closest out of any series in the West, because while the Nuggets took all 3 of the matchups, their average margin of victory was only 4 points, with one of those games going into double overtime. The deciding factor of the series is probably going to be Donovan Mitchell, because he has underperformed in all 3 of their matchups this season. He shot 1 for 12 in the first game, he did a Kobe tribute in the second game by shooting 8 for 24, but he shot 12 for 33 in that double overtime game we just saw last week. That is horrible shooting percentages. That is 30% in those 3 games. And so I think that might be a factor. But we also need to consider the fact that Utah is now without Bojan Bogdanovic, who was their starting small forward and second leading scorer behind Donovan Mitchell at 20 points a game. And so that's probably going to have a huge impact, but also Denver is just better off right now. Jokic in the bubble is currently averaging 20.1 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 9.1 assists, and he's shooting 51% from the field. And so they have that going for them, and they also have the blossoming of Michael Porter Jr., and it has been insane. Before the bubble in the regular season, MPJ averaged 7.5 points, 4.1 rebounds, and 0.7 assists, shooting 49.5% from the field and 42.2% from 3 on just 2 attempts. But now in the bubble, MPJ is averaging 22 points, 8.6 rebounds, and 1.6 assists, and he's shooting 55.1% from the field and 42.2% from 3 on 6.5 attempts a game. That is going to be huge going forward. Now, they did go into overtime with Donovan Mitchell shooting that terrible, so I do believe that even though they're undermanned, they could have a chance to make this a series. We just have to wait and see for that one. But now, the last matchup we're looking at is the matchup that came straight out of the sky from the basketball gods themselves, and that would be the Houston Rockets versus the OKC Thunder. Now, this matchup is probably going to be more interesting than Utah and Denver, but it probably won't be as close, if that makes sense. And that's mainly due to the backstory. So, after running into the Warriors and failing for 2 straight seasons, the Rockets thought it would be best if they parted ways with Chris Paul. And so, they ended up trading him, and possibly the largest amount of draft picks I've ever seen in a single trade, to the Thunder in exchange for Russell Westbrook. Which, my dad still swears to this day that they should have traded Harden instead of CP3. But given that Rockets general manager Daryl Morey has this kind of confidence in him...
If you looked at data at the time, once he had the ball in his hands, and it's still true to this day, and I get a lot of shit because someone asked me who's a better scorer, him or Michael Jordan, and it's just factual that James Harden is a better scorer than Michael Jordan.
I'd say that was probably never even going to happen anyway. And from there, the Thunder were pretty much expected to become a lottery team in rebuild mode, while Chris Paul spent the remaining years of his contract there, which was expected to be the end of his career. Well, things didn't exactly work out that way, because the Thunder at the time of the suspension actually had a better record than the Houston Rockets with James Harden and Russell Westbrook, which shows just how great Chris Paul actually is, which, by the way, remind me to do a video on that as well. And so the Rockets and Thunder series has 2 things going for it right now. It has the James Harden versus Chris Paul matchup, and it has the Russell Westbrook versus OKC matchup, which this series might actually be closer than you think, mainly because Westbrook is set to be out for part of the series, which may end up giving the Thunder an upper hand that they need. Because the way that Houston's offense now works with their micro ball experiment, Harden and Westbrook are the primary ball handlers, and that ends up opening the floor for everybody else. But now with Westbrook out, that gives OKC a chance to kind of lock in on Harden, since I would expect him to be the only person who's really driving and creating those shots on the perimeter. In terms of previous matchups, OKC has not yet played against Houston with their small ball lineup, and so that should be interesting. Although it is worth noting that the Thunder beat them in 2 out of their 3 games this season, with one of those wins coming by a margin of 21 points. And so OKC has the game plan to make it a close series. It would just be interesting to see if they have the ability to keep up with Houston's firepower. But also for the Thunder, Dennis Schroeder is now back in the bubble after leaving for the birth of a second child. But he now has to quarantine for an unspecified amount of time. From what I've seen in the last couple of weeks, we should probably expect it to be anywhere from between 4 to 10 days. And that's crucial because he returned on the 12th. So 4 days would mean he's back with the team this weekend, he's able to be there for the start of the playoffs. But 10 days would put him at the 22nd, which is 5 days after the scheduled start date of the playoffs on August 17th. And so he'd be missing probably 1 or 2 games. And he's a really important piece to their bench. And so we'd probably just have to wait until we get an actual timetable for him. But with all that being said, I have the Rockets winning the series, but I would not consider the Thunder winning to be out of the realm of possibility. And that would probably be the funniest outcome of this entire playoffs. And so there's the preview of the Western Conference. Again, we're not talking about the matchup between the Lakers and whoever because it's not set yet. And the Grizzlies just ruined the Dame versus Devin Booker matchup in the play-in tournament, and so we won't get to see that. But that'll still be interesting to see. I'm recording this as Portland is playing their game against the Nets, which if they win would knock out Phoenix and guarantee their spot in the play-in, which I would have them winning. I'll just ask him. Me from the future. What? How are we looking? Oh yeah, you were right. Alright, so with all that being said, let me know down below what you guys think we'll see in these playoffs. Also let me know if you think I should do a video like this for the Eastern Conference. Although I don't really think the matchups over there will be as exciting, at least not in the first round. Except maybe TJ Warren versus Jimmy Butler. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell to be notified when I upload, comment down below what you want to see next, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.